Conditions changed dramatically in the new year in Washington, D.C., with Democrats taking over control of the U.S. House of Representatives. What will that mean for the Trump administration, for the prospects of conservative policy reforms? Well, our next guest has some ideas. David French is a senior writer for National Review. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So you have been a person who has been watching the Trump administration very closely, praising them when praise is due, but oftentimes looking at things that Donald Trump has done and said, I don't really like where that's going. How is it going to change for him with a House of Representatives that's already inclined to be against him?
Right. I mean, I think the idea of a comprehensive conservative legislative agenda right now is pretty dead. Not just pretty dead, it's dead. But there wasn't much of a comprehensive conservative legislative agenda to begin with. Obamacare repeal mostly failed. I mean, the individual mandate is gone. Tax reform did go through. But aside from that, the proactive portions of the Trump agenda have been much more focused on judges, which, because the Republican majority in the Senate is increased, will be slightly easier. So expect the Mitch McConnell judge confirmation train to keep chugging along without the Democrats being able to stop it. And then, some elements of what I would call temporary regulatory reform. So a lot of people have praised the Trump administration for its rollback of some regulations, for its regulatory restraint. And I'm happy with that. But we all have to remember that everything he does on a regulatory front is completely temporary, because the next Democratic president can reverse it just as easily as Trump did what he did. If we want to have real regulatory reform, we have to have something far more substantial than a president either tapping the brakes or pressing the gas in their given presidential term. So I would say you'll look at a little bit more modest regulatory reform that is temporary. You'll look at some judges that are permanent. And then you're going to look at an awful lot of conflict. And when I say an awful lot of conflict, I mean it. In other words, the Democratic House will rain subpoenas down upon the Trump administration like rain falling from the heavens. It is going to be very contentious. There are going to be multiple investigations. Think of it like this way. Remember how the House very vigorously investigated the Obama administration when the Republicans had control? The Democrats are going to do the same thing to the Trump administration.
I think I've heard the term subpoena cannon from one of the leading Democrats who's going to be in charge once that takes place. You have been watching the Trump administration closely. Do you think there is a lot of opportunity for the Democrats to come up with legitimate stuff, not just fishing expeditions?
The Trump administration is a target-rich environment for subpoenas. I mean, Trump himself, has withheld an awful lot of details about his own personal finances to an extent greater than other previous presidential candidates, certainly to an extent greater than Mitt Romney, who is also a very, very successful businessman. Romney was far more transparent than Trump has been. The Democrats are going to want access to a lot of those financial records, and only more so now that it was revealed that negotiations for Trump Tower Moscow continued well into the presidential campaign, well after Trump secured the Republican nomination, in the same time that he was praising Vladimir Putin. I mean, these kinds of details are going to be fodder for a lot of investigation. And so I think, let's put it this way, as diligently as the Republicans investigated Benghazi, I think the Democrats will more diligently investigate a host of Trump issues, from campaign finance and the paying off of porn stars to Trump's business dealings with foreign powers. For example, it was just revealed that Saudi interests bought 500 hotel rooms at very premium prices at Trump Tower or Trump Hotel in Washington. Those kinds of dealings with foreign powers, and then also, of course, all the Russia stuff. So when I say a absolute downpour of subpoenas, I mean an absolute downpour of subpoenas.
We are chatting with David French, senior writer for National Review. Now, checks and balances are built into our system of government, so having one party check into what the other party is doing is not anything for us to be overly concerned about. What about this particular arrangement bothers you, if anything?
You know, the main thing I regret about the midterm losses for Republicans was that some of the better and more promising young Republican representatives who were representing some suburban districts that, frankly, Republicans need to have for conservative reforms now and in the future were lost. There were losses that should grieve conservatives who are looking to have a long-term conservative presence on the Hill, and I think that's, the power swinging back and forth. There's nothing new about that. It's far more rare in recent history to have unified control of the government than it is to have split government. So the fact of split government by itself is not as troubling to me, at least in the short term, than is the identity of some of the folks that we lost. Mia Love, I think, is a rising star in the Republican Party, and she's gone. Others gone, and so I think that's a problem for the conservative movement. Now, people can run again, and the pendulum can swing back again, but I think that's a real loss. And as for a negatively polarized country, I don't think there's any way anymore in this country that you can have divided government and it not be very, very, very contentious.
Some people are going to hear our conversation and they're going to say, that David French, he's a never-Trumper. It's all fake news. Trump's going to be successful and we're going to have a great couple of years. What would you say to them that would maybe try to convince them that perhaps what you're saying is worth listening to?
One of the things that I do is I will often I'll put the same facts into play, and I say, let's imagine that a Democratic president did these things. Would you be alarmed by that? Would you be alarmed if a Democratic president ordered his personal attorney to pay off porn stars in the closing days of an election cycle, and did so in a way that the Southern District of New York charged the attorney with felonies, and the attorney pled guilty to those felonies? Would that alarm you in a Democrat? And the answer is, of course it would. Would it alarm you if a Democrat was involved in business negotiations with a hostile foreign power while he was running for president and did not disclose that to the American people? Well, I know people would be concerned about that because I know they were very concerned about the Clinton Foundations, and rightfully concerned about the Clinton Foundation's actions that the FBI was actually investigating during the campaign. And so if you were concerned with the Clinton Foundation's activities, and you should be concerned with similar activities from the Trump companies. I mean, all of this stuff is, if you flip the party IDs, it begins to come into focus how we should feel about this. But the bottom line is, when you're talking about people who have contact with hostile foreign powers and then lie to law enforcement about that, I'm not concerned about that as a Republican. I'm not concerned about that as a Democrat. I'm concerned about that as an American. And it is not at all illegitimate in any way, shape, or form to take a look at contact with hostile foreign powers, especially when people lie about those contacts with hostile foreign powers. That's just counterintelligence 101. It's criminal law 101. And we have to be willing to see the truth for what it is and react accordingly.
Well, we certainly, as they say, live in interesting times.
We do.